She was religious in putting on her seatbelt. Why didn't she put it on that night?
We all still remember that dark night in Paris on August 31st, 1997, when Princess Diana was taken from us. Yet, decades later, disturbing details about the crash site are finally coming to light. What investigators eventually pulled from her wrecked car is absolutely chilling. Between the shocking physical evidence and haunting personal items, these discoveries shed a grim, unsettling light on the final moments of the People's Princess. So what exactly did they find in that wreckage? Join us as we unpack the startling secrets hidden inside Princess Diana's crash car on that chaotic, fateful night. In the pitch-black hours of August 31st, 1997, a horribly mangled Mercedes sat crushed and smoking inside the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris. Trapped inside the most famous woman on earth, Princess Diana was desperately fighting for her life. The disaster sent shockwaves across the globe, and the haunting questions left in its wake refused to fade even over 20 years later. When investigators finally inspected the ruined vehicle, their discoveries were more than just tragic. They were deeply unsettling, raising heavy questions that still haunt that night of August 31st, 1997. That evening had quickly devolved into a perfect storm of absolute chaos. Inside the Ritz Hotel in Paris, the final hours of Princess Diana's life were ticking away with an eerie, high-stakes intensity. She and her companion Dodi had suddenly returned to the hotel after cancelling their dinner plans. The reason? A massive crowd of paparazzi had swarmed outside their cameras, flashing in a relentless frenzy. A quiet evening had quickly devolved into pure tension under a blinding glare of flashbulbs, whispers and heavy speculation. Behind closed doors, a new plan was forming. Dodi wanted to avoid another public confrontation. They made a frantic split-second decision. They would slip away quietly through the hotel's rear service exit. Meanwhile, 2 decoy vehicles would pull away from the front lobby, drawing the pushy photographer's attention, while their getaway car, a black Mercedes S280, slipped out moments later. Inside were Diana Dodi's security guard Trevor Rees-Jones and Ritz officer Henri at the wheel. But those paparazzi were utterly relentless. The moment the Mercedes sped away just after midnight, cameras swung, scooters roared, and the chaotic chase was officially on. Witnesses later described a chaotic blur of aggressive motorcycles weaving dangerously between moving cars. Diana and Dodi had a tiny head start, but it evaporated in the mounting panic. The Mercedes accelerated rapidly, tearing through the Paris streets, heading straight for the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. Instead of making the anticipated right turn toward Dodi's private apartment nearby, the vehicle surged straight ahead, plunging directly into the tunnel. And in one horrific moment, everything changed forever. The speeding Mercedes slammed violently into the 13th concrete pillar of the tunnel. The impact was absolutely brutal. Dodi and driver Henri were killed instantly. Trevor Rees-Jones was barely clinging to life. A critically injured Princess Diana was still breathing as emergency responders scrambled to the scene. Yet the scene was absolute madness. Camera flashes kept popping even as medics desperately struggled to reach her. In the immediate aftermath, the horrific wreckage was only half the story. Total confusion ruled the night. Conflicting reports immediately piled up. The ruined Mercedes contained far more than physical damage. It held clues to a night shrouded in unanswered questions. And those answers, even decades later, are far from comforting. Why on earth did the driver take a route that bypassed their safest exit? Was he drunk, was he set up, or was there something far more complicated at play? Let us find out. Let us look at the man behind the wheel. The dark mystery surrounding Henri, the driver on that tragic night, has never stopped raising serious questions. Henri was no ordinary hired chauffeur. He served as the trusted deputy head of security at the famous Ritz Hotel in Paris. He was a professional used to managing celebrities, powerful politicians, and other high-profile global guests. He always carried himself with authority, exuding the kind of quiet confidence that came from decades of experience. Yet, on the night of August 30th, 1997, something was off. After clocking out from his shift around 7 p.m, Paul completely vanished. For nearly 3 hours, absolutely no one could account for where he went or what he was doing. That massive gap in the timeline remains one of the most unsettling mysteries of the case. Then right at 10 p.m, he was unexpectedly summoned back to the Ritz. Within minutes, he was arranging the fateful escape route that would lead Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed straight into the Pont de l'Alma tunnel and into tragedy. What makes this high-profile case even stranger is the evidence that surfaced afterward. Official autopsy blood tests claimed Paul was heavily intoxicated with a blood alcohol level over 3 times the French legal limit. On paper, he should have been stumbling and far too drunk to drive. However, the closed-circuit cameras inside the Ritz told a completely different story. CCTV footage showed Paul moving with ease, chatting warmly with staff, and even bending down to tie his shoes without stumbling once. His speech was crisp, his posture upright, and his physical actions highly precise. He was even captured laughing and joking with co-workers, showing the sharp alertness of someone in total control. Trevor Rees-Jones, Diana's personal bodyguard and the sole survivor of the crash, later testified under oath that Henri Paul seemed completely 100% sober. Not once did he suspect that Paul had been drinking alcohol. But these strange contradictions run even deeper. Just weeks after the tragedy, Lord Stevens, the senior officer leading the official Operation Padge investigation, privately met with Henri Paul's parents. According to official police files, he reassured them that their son would not be portrayed to the world as drunk. Yet, when his final public report was released, the official narrative shifted dramatically. Suddenly, this very same Henri Paul was branded as dangerously drunk. He was a man who would have faced serious criminal charges had he actually survived. If Paul was truly sober, we have to question the honesty of those blood tests and the truth of the official story. Those lost hours of his evening might actually hold the key. Perhaps he was meeting someone forced into a corner or completely set up. Whatever happened to Henri Paul that fateful night might explain his actions inside the tunnel and also reveal exactly why some people wanted the entire world to believe he was heavily intoxicated. And right when this tragic story seemed twisted, enough dark rumours started spreading about a second vehicle. A car that was never supposed to be inside that tunnel. So what did investigators uncover? Let us take a much closer look. Then came a shocking discovery. Inside the dark, echoing concrete of the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, investigators found a clue that simply did not belong. Scattered around the crushed frame of the Mercedes were fragments telling a completely different story, broken shards of a red taillight and subtle streaks of white paint. They never belonged to Diana's car. Instead, they matched a different vehicle altogether, a white Fiat Uno. This was a massive revelation, yet this tiny common car was missing from all official reports. No eyewitnesses stepped forward to say they had a clear view. No license plate was ever recorded, but its physical presence was absolutely undeniable. The wrecked Mercedes carried clear proof of physical contact. Forensic lab tests proved that paint from a Fiat Uno was transferred directly onto the right side of the luxury vehicle. Something had definitely gone wrong. Was it a sideswipe, a gentle nudge, or a deliberate hit seconds before the crash? It raised a truly chilling question. Did this mystery vehicle block the Mercedes from exiting the tunnel, or worse, run it straight into that fatal 13th concrete pillar? French detectives searched everywhere for answers, tracking down more than 4,600 separate vehicles. But the elusive Fiat never turned up. Yet suspicions kept growing. Mohammed Al-Fayed's investigators believed they had finally cracked the mystery. Their focus locked onto James Anderson, a notorious paparazzi photographer with a relentless obsession for Diana and Dodi. He owned a white Fiat Uno and had closely tailed the couple during their recent Mediterranean getaway. And according to several different accounts, he actually bragged about being right near that tunnel on that tragic night. Before long, detectives tracked down Anderson's Fiat Uno, but something was off. A taillight had been freshly replaced, and then the most chilling twist unfolded. In the year 2000, James Anderson was found dead in rural France. His body was discovered inside a burned-out vehicle deep within a forest. Police quickly ruled the death a suicide by self-immolation, but massive doubts spread like wildfire. There was no lighter, no final note, and his remains were almost entirely turned to ash. But what exactly was Diana running from or chasing on that tragic night? Let us examine the specific outfit she wore and the personal items she kept close to her. The mysterious ring before the crash. Just a few hours before the shocking tragedy shook the entire world, Dodi Fayed slipped quietly into one of Paris's most exclusive luxury jewellery boutiques. Repossi, a name that glittered brightly among the city's most prestigious luxury boutiques. He was not visiting by pure accident. He had a very clear and deeply personal mission. Once inside, hidden completely away from the curious eyes of the public, Dodi selected a ring from the famous Dis-moi collection, which translates in English to say yes to me. The ring itself was neither flashy nor over the top. It was not covered in massive glittering diamonds that screamed for attention. Instead, it was a simple gold band, elegant, refined, and understated. The type of piece that carried much more emotional meaning than sparkle. It was definitely the sort of ring that whispered promises rather than loudly shouting wealth. After picking it out, Dodi arranged for the ring to be delivered quietly to the Ritz Hotel, where he and Princess Diana were staying together that night. The jewellery was immediately locked away inside a hotel safety deposit box, hidden away from public view yet packed with unspoken gravity. But the true significance of this ring would not stay secret for very long. Dodi had actually shown Diana the jeweller's brochure earlier, and in the painful aftermath of the crash, this tiny piece of jewellery transformed into one of the most talked about objects on Earth. And it was not just the ring that was fueling heavy speculation. Loud whispers began circulating that Diana was pregnant. The rumour mill spun out of control while tabloid photos showed her in a swimsuit during her getaway with Dodi. Several gossip rags eagerly zoomed in on her midsection, pointing directly to what they insisted was the early outline of a baby bump. Close friends described her as absolutely glowing, while others dropped hints that she was preparing to share some massive news with the public very soon. To those who desperately wanted to believe, all the puzzle pieces fit together seamlessly: a stunning engagement ring, a secret pregnancy, and a romance that would connect Diana with a partner completely outside of the traditional royal mould. But as investigators dug deeper, the actual hard evidence quickly began to clash with these beautiful romantic stories. Forensic testing was done on the blood samples retrieved from the crash scene, and those tests showed zero biological signs of pregnancy whatsoever. On top of that, it surfaced during the official inquiry that Diana was actually on birth control at the time. This detail, confirmed by her physician and backed by medical files, painted a completely different picture of her life. Those closest to Diana, including her tightest circle of friends, later gave testimony too. They clarified that while her romance with Dodi was incredibly thrilling and passionate, it was still very fresh. She loved the romance, the spontaneity, and the fresh sense of freedom he brought her. But they insisted there was never any real talk of getting engaged, much less starting a family. For Diana, after surviving years of relentless media hounding and endless personal drama, this summer romance was just a happy escape, not the groundwork for another marriage. Even so, not everyone accepted this story. At the very front of the skeptics was Mohammed Al-Fayed Dodi's father, a man of incredible wealth and influence. Mohammed was deeply convinced that his son and Diana were genuinely in love and planning a life together. He repeatedly claimed that Diana was carrying his grandchild and that the engagement was real. To him, that fatal crash was absolutely no accident. He claimed that powerful figures inside the British establishment were completely horrified by the thought of a Muslim man fathering the potential step-sibling of a future king, had secretly planned the entire crash to stop it. The official inquest into Diana's death investigated these claims deeply. They questioned witnesses, scrutinized medical records, and carefully combed through every single piece of evidence. Lord Stevens, the man leading the official British investigation, made his findings crystal clear. Diana was not pregnant, and she was not engaged. His team based their final conclusion on forensic science, eyewitness testimony, and hard evidence recovered from the wreckage. Yet despite the official reports, the powerful symbol of that ring refuses to fade away. For some, it stands for what might have been a beautiful love story, cut short before the next chapter could begin. To others, it is just an expensive piece of jewellery turned into a myth by a public desperate to make sense of a senseless tragedy. And while that engagement ring sat locked away in silence, another force was being incredibly loud. A much more dangerous presence had been hunting them all night, something that had absolutely nothing to do with romance or secrets. It arrived with flashing camera bulbs, relentless high-speed chases, and an endless hunger for photos. What role did the paparazzi play that night? Let's look closer. The press. The role of these aggressive photographers has always sparked intense debate and controversy. On that tragic night in Paris, when the black Mercedes finally crashed inside the Alma tunnel, its metal body completely crushed, and its frame twisted completely beyond recognition, the photographers were already there. Witnesses, including a couple of American tourists passing by in a taxi, later described a deeply chilling and haunting scene. The concrete tunnel was not just filled with the thick stench of smoke and hot metal. It echoed with the relentless clicking of cameras. Groups of paparazzi swarmed the wreckage not to pull people out or help, but to snap profitable photos. A few even climbed onto the hood of the crushed vehicle shoes, scraping the dented metal, while others leaned right through shattered glass to get shots. To onlookers, they did not behave like witnesses. They looked like scavengers circling the wounded, like vultures feeding on raw tragedy. One of the very first to reach the crash site was Dr. Frédéric Maillies, a French medic, who happened to be driving past. At first, he had absolutely no clue who was in the car. All he knew was that people were dying, driven by pure instinct. He ran to the car, pulled open the door, and started helping a woman who was severely injured but still breathing. Only much later did he realize the fragile woman he was struggling to keep alive was actually Princess Diana herself. He worked fast, clearing her airway and giving whatever basic first aid he could manage until the ambulances finally arrived. Yet, even during those tense life or death moments, he could not block out the sound of cameras clicking all around him. It was deeply shocking, he recalled later, not because the photographers blocked him, but because they stood there watching, far more interested in getting their photos than offering any kind of help to the dying. Legally, their actions were in a grey area. That night, French police arrested 7 photographers. Several spent the night locked in holding cells, and a few faced charges for failing to help accident victims, which is a serious crime under French law. But plans to charge them with much heavier crimes like manslaughter or causing the crash quickly fell apart. As time went on, those charges were dropped, and any hope for real justice faded away. Most of the pictures they took that night never saw the light of day. Some were quietly confiscated, while others were locked away forever. To Trevor Rees-Jones, Diana's bodyguard and the only person to survive the crash, the press was more than insensitive. They were a suffocating, overwhelming and emotionally unbearable presence. While no photographer physically blocked the emergency medical teams, but those blinding flashing cameras warped the dark underpass into something grotesque. Rather than a scene where medics could desperately focus on saving lives, it became a dark stage lit by relentless flashes, almost as if Princess Diana's final struggle was just a scene in some movie. It was, in his exact words, an absolute insult to human dignity. And that is where the true horror lay. Whether or not those aggressive photographers actually caused the crash, they undoubtedly shaped her final moments. For years, the princess had spoken out about the constant suffocating pressure of being hunted by the press. She often described the profound loneliness and emotional toll of never escaping the spotlight. On the fateful night she died in her absolute most vulnerable state, those blinding cameras were among the last things she ever saw. But the conspiracy questions surrounding that tragic night did not end with the paparazzi. They only grew bigger and stranger as the years slipped by, stretching far beyond that Paris tunnel. What followed was a messy web of official investigations, legal blunders, and highly suspicious delays. Some shocking failures came from French authorities, while others, even more damning, stemmed from the very establishments built to uncover the truth. In fact, it would take a whole decade before Britain finally launched its first official inquest into the tragic deaths of Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed. 10 years of silence, wild speculation, and growing suspicion. By the time those official proceedings actually started, public trust had completely eroded. Amazingly, 4 different coroners were assigned to the case, only to step down one after the other. 2 resigned under intense pressure. One tragically died before the hearings could even begin, and another was forced out after critics claimed she lacked the proper experience to handle such a complex jury. To many observers, this revolving door of high-level officials looked less like bureaucratic incompetence and far more like a deliberate strategy, an ongoing attempt to stall, to delay, and perhaps even to permanently bury the truth. By the time Lord Justice Scott Baker took over the inquest, the public's patience had worn incredibly thin. Many observers openly wondered whether these delays were entirely deliberate. Right from the very start, this official inquest promised to be unlike any other. This was never going to be just some polite routine formality. The coroner presented the jury with a shocking list of 20 crucial questions that absolutely had to be answered. These were definitely not vague gestures toward emotional closure. They were sharp, incredibly specific, and deeply unsettling. Did Diana ever fear for her very life? And if she did, why? Let's find out. In October 1996, a worried Princess Diana penned a truly chilling letter to her trusted butler, Paul Burrell. In those chilling pages, she claimed her husband was plotting a major car accident, specifically mentioning brake failure and a severe head injury. She felt certain she was constantly being watched, even telling her lawyer, Lord Mishcon, that people were actively plotting against her. These weren't merely private, fleeting fears. They were written down, spoken about, and forever remembered. Back then, most people brushed those worries off as simple stress or overactive imagination. But years later, when her words were finally read aloud in court, they sounded far too close to reality. Even Lord Mishcon admitted he originally found it hard to believe. Yet when he mentioned her fears to her private secretary, Patrick Jeffson shockingly admitted he half believed they could be true. The fatal car crash may have been the tragic end, but Diana had long believed someone was setting a trap. And investigators continuously found even deeper shadows, the more they looked, with some pointing straight to intelligence circles. The whispers about British Secret Services only grew much louder after her sudden death. Within minutes of the news, Mohammed Al-Fayed, father of Dodi, publicly called it a murder, not an accident. He firmly believed Diana's relationship with his son was a direct threat to the British monarchy, and that powerful forces wanted her silenced. Diana herself had warned she was being closely monitored. The official inquest revealed shocking claims that her phones were tapped and that MI6 tracked her movements. Lord Stevens, who headed the official Operation Paget investigation, was even granted incredibly rare access to MI6 records. He reported that no evidence of an assassination plot was ever found. But critics quickly wondered if certain records had simply been erased or never even written down. Attention also shifted to Henri Paul, the Ritz Hotel's security chief, and their driver that fateful night. French intelligence had previously used his help in hotel inquiries, leading many to suspect he was far more than just a regular employee. Immediately following the tragic crash, Diana remained inside an ambulance for 1 hour and 43 minutes before finally reaching an operating table. Even though the horrific wreck was only about 3 miles away from one of Paris's top trauma hospitals, instead of rushing her directly to the nearest medical facility, doctors followed strict French protocol by stabilizing her on-site before slowly transporting her across the city. Emergency officials strongly defended their system, but critics asked why a dying woman was not rushed immediately to the closest hospital. Inside that ambulance, Diana suffered cardiac arrest, was briefly revived, but her injuries were simply devastating. By the time surgeons finally opened her chest, her torn pulmonary vein made her survival almost completely impossible. The first physician on the scene, Dr. Frederick Maillier, remarked that she looked peaceful as if asleep and denied that the paparazzi ever interfered with his emergency work. Outwardly, she seemed completely unharmed, but the internal damage was beyond repair. Investigators carefully combed the mangled Mercedes wreckage, hunting for clues. They recovered shattered pieces of Diana's last night, including a broken pearl necklace in the back seat. Later, blood tests disproved rumours of pregnancy, but they recovered no diary and no purse. Official mechanics confirmed the brakes, tyres and steering worked fine. There was absolutely no trace of sabotage. Yet so many details still did not make sense. Crucial security cameras were turned off facing the wrong direction or entirely missing. No camera captured any footage of the mysterious white Fiat Uno that witnesses reported seeing. No footage recorded the actual moment of impact. Making things even more suspicious, the tunnel was reopened to traffic by 10:30 in the morning. Commuters were speeding through the tunnel before forensic teams finished gathering evidence. The entire crash site was cleared away too quickly. Now, more than 25 years later, the truth of Diana's tragic passing remains unresolved for millions of people. While the official report rules it a tragic accident, massive questions still linger. What do you think about these chilling discoveries from Princess Diana's wrecked vehicle? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to hit like and subscribe.